so over the last couple of years, I've given this talk somewhere, and the prefix of the talk is always hope, heart, and homeopathy. Hope of the patient who comes to you. So many times they have more hope in the doctor than the doctors have hope in themselves. The heart of a physician who has the courage to take up that case, and homeopathy, something for which we sit here today, we stand here today, we get our name, recognition, bread, butter, everything from. So these lectures are hope, heart, and homeopathy. And I share with you some clinical experiences. Like I said, there's nothing that you would not know. Probably there's nothing that I'm teaching you new. All that is mentioned in our textbooks of Materia Medica. And when I say textbooks of Materia Medica, please understand, I talk about Hahnemann's Materia Medica Pura. I talk about the chronic diseases. I talk about T.F. Allen's Encyclopedia. I talk about Herring-Geidic symptoms. I talk about John Henry Clark. I talk about Materia Medica of Nosot's, what we call the texts of Materia Medica, which is the soil of homeopathy. The first case I share with you is of a little baby who was just about 2 months old when we saw him, and he had umbilical pyogenic granuloma. Now this is a condition where modern medicine typically offers cauterization, which has to be done a couple of times. And even at the end of that, there's a possibility that it might persist for a long period of time. So we saw this little baby, and he was an active baby, but he had a very old looking face. And there were dark eyes and hair, pretty interactive, hairy arms. And because it's the first child in the family, so the parents and the grandparents came with a lot of anxiety that, doctors have said that we need to cauterize the little baby's lesion. So it had been observed since the 3rd week after birth, and by the time the baby came to us at the end of 2nd month, it had grown up a little more, and there was also an oozing from the navel. And then they had also gone for an ultrasound, which showed there was a small sinus inside as well. So we went for a history, and there was a full-term vaginal delivery. The baby was never breastfed because the mother did not produce a feed. There was no neonatal jaundice. The kid had been given whatever vaccinations were required till 2 months from birth. And there was a pretty good neck movement, and the baby was pretty alert and sharp. Then we looked for the family history, and we found polycystic ovarian syndrome, diabetes, hypothyroidism. The father was suffering with OCD. Grandmother had hypothyroidism, osteoarthritis. Now, the important part of homeopathic case taking is the intrauterine history. So we went for the intrauterine history, and what we found was that the baby was conceived at Delhi at 1.5 months, right, or very soon after marriage. And the parents were pretty anxious. The grandparents were pretty anxious because the mother was suffering with polycystic ovarian syndrome and was overweight. So the mother was at home, pretty pampered. And around the 5th month of pregnancy, she had some itching and rashes. Not much of nausea or vomiting. The mother gained another 20 kgs of weight. And towards the end of pregnancy, she had some craving for sweets and a couple of other rich items. So this entire totality, when I put up, I got a few symptoms. And when you go through John Henry Clark, you find the face is wrinkled, pale, old looking, is suited to the affections of newborn children, and oozing of blood and moisture from navel of newborn. So we gave the baby abrotinum LM1. So we dissolved 1 globule in about 15 ml of water with 8 drops of alcohol. We said give 3 drops morning, evening. And he received ascending potencies till LM3. And as you can see, within 2 months, the lesion almost went away. And then we encouraged the patients that please go for an ultrasound. We need to see whether the sinus is cleared inside or not. But they were hesitant. They were like, okay, it's a newborn child. Why do we have to go for an ultrasound? I said, okay, whenever you're ready, please go for an ultrasound. And then they repeated the ultrasound in the month of May. That's when the internal sinus is also cleared completely. So A very small case, short case, snapshot prescribing, easy to prescribe based on materia medica, but a good clinical experience. The second case that I share with you is of portal vein thrombosis. Portal vein thrombosis is a pretty serious condition which can be life-threatening because the thrombus can settle and can travel and settle anywhere else. And the thromboembolic phenomena can lead to a brain hemorrhage or a stroke, can go to the lungs and get lodged there and lead to an acute medical emergency. So we saw the 60-year-old gentleman. First time we saw last year in the month of January. He had come to us earlier as well for a consultation, but then that problem had gone away and then he was all right for a couple of years and then he came back again with this report. And in the beginning of January 2018, experienced pain in the epigastric region, and when it did not subside over the following 2-3 days, he went to the nearby doctor who examined and said that, probably we require some investigations for you because it doesn't look all right. So this gentleman works for the Indian Oil Company and he's a very senior official there. So he got hospitalized and then they put him through a series of investigations. So he went through ileocolonoscopy, duodenoscopy, and eventually there was CT scan of the abdomen, which showed that there was portal vein thrombosis. So the typical treatment is that they give the thrombolizing agents and they give the corticosteroids, and he started reacting to that. So that's when he came to us. He said, what can we do about it? So as a homeopath, what can we do? We do the case taking and then we prescribe the suitable remedy. That's all that we do, and we see what effect happens. So at the time of consultation, he was still experiencing continuous pain in the epigastrium, and there was also a heaviness in the abdomen 5 to 10 minutes after eating. Burping required an effort while voiding flatus was easy. And for some time now, he had also started experiencing a postnasal drip and his throat had become more sensitive. And this is something for which we had treated him earlier. And for a couple of years, he's been all right. We treated him for a few months, and his sensitivity to throat and his tendency for cold and postnasal drip had gone away, from which he suffered since childhood. And in his current situation, he could take liquid food very easily. Semi-solid food made him uneasy. At the age of 8 to 9 years, he recalled that he suffered with typhoid, which relapsed consecutively over the following 4-5 years. And while he was in grade 10 is when he fractured his left leg, and also during college time he fractured his left wrist. His mother had died when he was a kid because of rabies, and one of his brother also suffered with the thromboembolic phenomena. The second brother had hepatitis B, and the third brother had died with myocardial infarction. So he went to generalities, and there was about half liter of water intake per day. And he says, if I force myself, I can take up to 2 liters, but trust me, I don't really want to have that kind of water. His sleep was good. There were dreams of falling, of fighting. There was not much perspiration, except a little bit on the forehead. And he had a strong craving for sweets, 3+, especially jalebis. And he preferred rains and winters. He was more sensitive to cold than the other family members. Taste was normal, tongue was moist. Centrally, there was a white streak. He was the youngest in the family, and he lost his parents, both the parents, when he was a kid. But then his elder sisters supported him. He worked in the government sector soon, and with hard work, he'd grown in his career. He also had an arranged marriage later on, but his wife suffers with rheumatoid arthritis, who also we are treating with homeopathy. And he's got 2 kids, and they both are married and settled down. Life has been a little challenging, he says, but not that I have given up, and I've had success as well. So I don't have any regrets in life. Then we ask about mind and disposition. See, there's a lot of talk about mental symptom, but what Hahnemann mentions in Organon is disposition. That is more important. Disposition means somebody's usual behavior. And that deviation in the usual behavior is what is to be noted. So he's quite a sincere guy, and he has a very limited life. Family, office, does not have much of a social circle, always been caring, sympathetic, a little authoritative because, with hard work, he's attained a certain height in his career. And he says life has made him very thrifty, but he does not shy away from any expenditure. But he says, if I've got one pair of shoe, I'm happy with that. I would not want to invest into more because I have grown up from that phase where I did not even have money for one shoe. So, and then he's quite a punctual guy, very tolerant and patient, and he said this is something I've learned from my life. But again, these are some things which he has, these are the personality traits which have evolved over time. They're explained by his life and circumstances. So, I did not give much weightage to that, but what I had treated him earlier with, and he responded to as well, and which still seemed to me to be a possible remedy, was typhoidnum, because that's the only one repeated episode he had as a kid for numerous years, and that impression was still carrying on. And we've also compiled some data, and I presented a paper on typhoidnum. It is an excellent remedy for certain allergic conditions, allergic background. And his throat sensitivity also confirms that. So we gave him typhoidum LM6, and then his heaviness went away, his digestion became better, his throat sensitivity went away, and we continued him on the ascending LM potencies. And almost at the end of the year, when we repeated the CT scan, the portal vein thrombosis had disappeared completely. Wow. It is one of the remedies which has not been proved, is still not a part of Materia Medica, and in fact I have come to know that they're making an effort to discontinue the production of typhoidum now. But what I recommend is that whosoever has had clinical experience, please go ahead and publish your papers so that at least the production remains, because who knows when we might require it. It's a rarely used remedy, but when required there is no alternate for it. Another case I share with you is a lady that I saw when I was still working in the government sector. I was in charge of two dispensaries. One of them was in a rural setup where we used to see almost 200 to 225 patients, and the other was in the South Campus, Delhi University, where we just had about 30 odd patients. But this is one patient we saw in the village, where we had more than 200 plus patients. So this was the dispensary. We didn't have electricity, we didn't have windows, and the door was also pretty rickety. We hardly had furniture, we didn't have staff. But yes, I was like Pankaj Bhaiya told you, I was the chief medical officer. But yes, what you got there was gratitude of patients and an ability to help the mankind and to learn from them. I regularly attend the LMHI Congress, and I remember I met this very old homeopath there, and he's a very, very, very senior and a classical homeopath, and he said that, I asked him, I said, sir, can you share something with me? Can you teach me something? He said, remember, read your patient carefully because he is your best teacher. So that's something which I have learned and have seen from my clinical practice as well. I saw a 40 years old short-statured lady who was very emaciated, a mother of 2 kids, and she was suffering with rheumatic heart disease and had undergone valvuloplasty. And when she came to the dispensary, she was extremely breathlessness. When we say MRC breathlessness scale grade 4, that means they can barely walk 90 meters without stopping for 10-15 minutes. So that kind of breathlessness, and there was a persistent non-productive coughing. And she was dark, emaciated, fixed shoulders, and even while we were asking her questions, she stopped plenty of times to take a breath, and there was a constant hacking cough and breathlessness, which she said was making her life miserable. She could barely carry out the household chores. throat was still sensitive to cold drink, food, weather, temperature. And as a kid also, she recalled always having a sensitive throat with fever, and the fevers were usually around 100 to 100.5 degree Fahrenheit, and underwent valvuloplasty later on. Father had suffered with tuberculosis and was a smoker, and for last 2 years she hadn't had her periods. She had been married for 13 years, also had a 12-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter, and she was barely literate. And she was chilly, there was no appetite, there was no thirst, and she said that, I can barely sleep because I have to sit up with pillows at my back. I cannot lie down at all. And she was irritable. I weighed about 32 kgs, short-statured, and so we framed the totality, these couple of things, and we first gave a Baraita Carb 30. But there was no relief. Neither did the breathlessness improve, nor did the coughing go away. So then we waited for a while and gave a Baraita Carb 200, but again there was no response. So what happened is that somewhere around 2012 or so, Dr. Khan had introduced us to mitral valve with LM potencies, and that's one thing we gave empirically in the patient because we did not see any other indication, and the indicated remedy, which I found Baraita Carb, did not give any response. And soon after we gave mitral valve in LM potencies is when the picture changed. She came walking for the first time, the breathlessness was better, the coughing reduced, and the appetite improved. And she continued to take the ascending potencies of mitral valve, and then she could start sleeping with lesser number of pillows, and after about LM3 is when she could sleep just with one pillow under the head. So that was the first winter that she experienced, when she said that, this is the first winter as long as I remember where I have been able to carry on all my activities without losing breath or without any illness. Oh. And she even went out shopping, though it was winters. And then, there came a phase, she said that, I feel absolutely normal, but I can't carry heavy weights. And then she said that, if I can start working now, if you'd allow me, because I need to support my family financially. So from a lady, who could barely breathe, to a stage where, she wants to work. And then, so we continued seeing her. And this was the last visit because this is when I quit my job. So I didn't see her after that. But we did something we call Oridal scoring. Oridal scoring is an objective score by which you can observe the impact of treatment. We call this outcome in relation to impact on daily living. So it shows the improvement on the quality of life of a patient. It's an objective marker. So we did that, and then these were the MRC breathlessness scores that we saw. And interestingly, I presented this case last year in the LMHI as well. And this year, this lady comes up to my clinic suddenly and she said, I've been inquiring about you and I've come here. And I'll just share a small video with you. If you look at her.
मुझे पता है ये परेशानी जो इंसान मुझे भी नहीं देखी थी ना गला के काशी হবে এখানটা ঘুমানো है कुछ कुछ कर रही है और काश से
क्या काम करते हो आप?
मैं पेशेंट केयर करते हैं सर बीपी शुगर चेक करना
This is that lady who received mitral valve.
ये 24 घंटे पेशेंट को सकती है
Now she works 24 hours a day.
और जब आप आए थे तब कैसे थे?
तब मुझे ना मेरा जीना भी आराम हो रहा था मैंने कहा ना डॉक्टर मैं जाने को जी करता है लेकिन क्या करूं बच्चे हैं इसलिए नहीं बन पाते तो इसीलिए हम आपको भगवान कहते हैं और इसीलिए मैंने इनको कहा कि तो मुझे पता है ये परेशानी.
It just shows, how mitral valve in ascending LM potencies transformed her life. And currently she's working as a helper. She helps patients and she works with them almost in 24-hour shifts, and she's absolutely normal. We didn't put her through any investigations, we don't know, but this is a paper we published in Homeopathic Links last year. So far in my little clinical experience, we've given mitral valve twice to 2 patients, and we shared the clinical experiences with the request that, you know, this remedy also ought to be proved properly in the Hahnemannian guidelines. So it's no more an empirical prescribing, it is a definite prescribing.